8mm home movies that I started taking in about 1960. This is about the time that Esther and I first started dating. She was going to Swedish Hospital at the time, and I was in the Army. She was about 20 years old, and I was about 26 at the time. Most of these movies are taken of our family, of course, because that was the most important thing in our lives at that time. And when I went down there to see Esther.
This squirrel, I believe, is near the Swedish Hospital down in Minneapolis. I'm not sure how my audio is going to be, but I'm going to continue anyway, and there'll be a lot of blank areas and so forth. This was the skyline back in about 1960 or so. That was a courthouse building, I believe. This is Northwestern Bell. And you can see the skyline is nothing like it is nowadays. They had microwave antennas up there on the telephone building. Here's my mother watering some flowers out at the farm 2 miles north and 2 miles west of Ulen, and my dad is mowing grass. Some of this I haven't seen for years, so I'm just winging it, trying to explain what I see here, and sometimes there'll be a lot of pauses. My dad was quite a mechanic. He'd pick up an old mower, fix it up, and use it, and maybe give it away to somebody, and those kind of things back then. There's my dad pulling a truck, and Elton Fivig is in the truck. And they were unloading grain here. The fellow you see there, he was Jerome Thorson. He was a deputy sheriff later on in life. And he was a son of my cousin Joan, used to be Fivig Thorson. This is what they called the West Farm. And here's one of the cats that belonged to my sister Shirley. This is all 8mm film. This is Mavis. My sister worked at this motel in Detroit Lakes. And that's Mavis that is working out there. I had a 54 Ford, and I had my ham radio mobile antenna on the back there. And I believe I was home on furlough here, so I had a uniform on. That would have been in 1960. I think I had just gotten out of basic training, and I had gotten to Fort Bliss, Texas, at El Paso, Texas. And this was outside of our barracks, I guess. Here, I went to a bullfight. It's the first and last bullfight I'll ever see. Such a goring thing, I don't think I ever want to see it again. Pretty popular event. They kill about 3 bulls in a day, and the bull is so wore out by the time they kill it, it can't hardly stand or anything anymore anyway, and then they become a hero by killing it. Now they're wearing it out. It's a little unfair. I think they call that a bandolero or whatever it is in his shoulders. Just painful, and you see the blood. Makes the bull mad. Quite a crowd. A lot of cheering. The bull doesn't have a chance. They're getting the bull quite wore out by now. Finally, he's down. And then they knife him in the back of his head, or however, and they come in with a team of horses and drag him off. Once that's done, they bring in another bull and do it all over again. I believe that's a B-52 bomber coming over our barracks. We had a lot of them coming out of the air base just north of us at Fort Bliss. On warm days, I'd ask to be off, and I'd go to the swimming pool. It was a lot cooler. That was on base, of course, at Fort Bliss. And now I got into more Minnesota-like temperatures and everything. Went up to Cloudcroft, and this would have been in the winter time. It's about 4,000 feet higher in elevation, and there were a lot of trees and more like we have it here in Minnesota, kind of. Here was a parade. I think this was maybe in the El Paso or the Sun Carnival, they called it. As I mentioned before, this is 8mm old film taken back in about 1960 or so. No sound. This is a skydiving group. It wasn't the group that I was with. I was in the Fort Bliss skydiving club. I think this was another club around there. But we did jump in the Sun Carnival, and that's when I had a malfunction in my chute. Here's a guy flying a model airplane, not radio controlled. It was done with a couple of lines going up from the ground, and you'll see him down here controlling the airplane. We also went horseback riding one time off base. I can't remember exactly where that was. Here are some troops from across the way standing inspection. We hardly ever had to stand any inspection in our group because most of the guys were either working at the motor pool, were cooks, and myself, I was working down at the telephone exchange or out on a microwave station. So it was such a different type of a group. We didn't have inspections because they worked different hours. This, I believe, was still up at Cloudcroft now. This was downtown El Paso. Alan Severson and myself, we got together down there. I don't think he's in these pictures. We did take a still picture, I believe, here. There's even an alligator down there. I think that's a minister or someone preaching out of the Bible. Sergeant Broom. He was a very nice fellow. He was our boss, but he was one of us. And that's, I don't know what he was, Spec 4 Fivig, I believe. No, maybe Spec 5. Yeah. And we worked on a radar tracking station. It was work for Hughes Aircraft. The military was planning to buy some equipment from Hughes Aircraft, and we were supposed to check it out and log everything and give our opinions on how the equipment worked. It was some of the first computers that it was operated by. But we were out at a Air Force base just west of Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I lived out there for a little bit, but then usually we would drive back to our Fort Bliss barracks. Those are some of our power plants out there, because we'd have to be totally portable. They'd take this equipment out in the field and so forth. This is my sister running back from the chicken house into the house out on the farm where my folks lived, and her cats. Must have been at a time when I was on leave or something. I believe I was still in the Army here. That is Jeffrey Puhala and Shirley. This is the Baudette Air Force Base. There was we call it the 24 Tower. It's a antenna that is 134 feet across, and it's up on a 5-story tall building. And it puts out so much power. One day when I was driving by, and back then we had flash bulbs for our cameras, one of my flash bulbs burned out as I drove past this site on the road. That was amazing. There's Jeffrey again. Got rid of some of the noise there. Some of these pictures might be repeated. The bearing at the bottom of that antenna measured, I believe, 12 feet in diameter. And it had to be replaced, I believe, a couple of times while I was out at the base there. still out at the farm, both Shirley and Mavis and Jeffrey. And there was something that came in the mail that day. Jeffrey came home. And my mother. Here is Herman Strand on his motor scooter. He would usually come around every Sunday afternoon. And he had different vehicles. I mean, he had a scooter like this, and he had another one. And I think he had a motorcycle later. Here, he let me drive it. Linda Wang Knuffler, my cousin. Jeffrey is not very big there. My mother had chickens. She would sell eggs at Yulin on Saturday night for groceries and things like that. But we had quite a few chickens. Not very many here. Now we're back at Swedish Hospital. I believe Esther did most of her nurses training there and then later finished up at Grand Forks. Back to Jeffrey. Now he's standing at least, and I think he's maybe started walking by now. Yes, he has. We took a trip out to Chicago, Illinois, or in that area, and there was Portia and her husband. As I mentioned before, this is old 8mm film without sound. This is Ron Thompson. Now we're back at our trailer, I believe. I'm not sure where we're at the moment. At Baudette, Minnesota. No, I believe we're in someone else's home. Ron Thompson was a fellow that used to go with me anytime we'd parakite. And we'd have a lot of people that would show up on a Sunday afternoon and we'd give rides. I believe we gave as much as 100 people, or 100, yeah, about 100 people rides because they'd come out and thought it was fun to go. Howard Link was a friend of mine. Well, anyway, now we're back to Ron Thompson. As I mentioned, this is Howard Link, and they used to be friends of mine, Tom Nichols and his wife, and their son, and he became a worked on cars and different things like that. This is Joe Farrell. He had a hardware store, the Farrell Hardware Store in Baudette. And this was Howard Link's radio equipment, and I'd use that every once in a while to talk back to Eulin, maybe Clayton Ormbrecht, or my cousin even, I believe, Archie Waller in Moorhead. But Joe Farrell and Howard Link, they had places downtown above the hardware store. I'm not sure where I'm at here. I believe this is back out in Chicago where Portia and her husband lived. I'm not sure, but I think it might be. I shouldn't say so because I'm not sure. We must be back near Swedish Hospital again down in Minneapolis. Now we're back to the farm where my folks live, 2 miles north, 2 miles west of Ulen. And there's Jeffrey again. And he's walking quite well now. Somebody's snowmobile. It's got I believe, an airplane engine on the back and a pusher propeller. We're in Ulen, and I believe I drove through Ulen here. It's not a very good video, but you can see some of the old business places. The drugstore will be coming up, and the old lumber yard on the right. That was Art Sorensen. And back to our trailer at Baudette. Our trailer home was, I'm not sure what it was. It was 8 foot wide only. And I don't know, 40 feet long, or I'm not sure what it was anymore. I see I have a company car and then my own car out there. That's inside the trailer house. Now we're back at Ulen again, over at my folks' place. And Jeffrey, he did a lot of dancing around. Quite an entertainer. That's a black and white TV in the background. Elton Fivig bouncing Jeffrey. And he's feeding me. I had a telephone right next to my bed, and that way, if I had a call out in the middle of the night, uh, my boss commented that I would pick up the telephone before it rang twice. And a lot of times I'd have to run out to the air base and maybe replace a fuse or something that happened to a piece of equipment out there. That was Becky, I believe. And this is Weiss, I believe. Yes. Dennis Weiss on skis on Rainy River, northwest of Baudette. Yep, that's who it is. And there he is again. And I think some of the airmen behind there, the Air Force provided the airmen with some water devices. I wonder if they didn't have boats and maybe even water skis that they could use. Mickey, Denny, Rachel, and Esther. Yeah, Dennis Weiss was a good friend of mine. And he was out at the air base. And there is Dennis Weiss being pushed by a couple of airmen. I don't know if there had been a parade that day or something. There was something going on in Baudette, downtown. I forget this fellow's name, but he was a very nice fellow. He was from the air base as well. And those are all from the air base, these guys. They all knew me because I worked over at the telephone building. Willie the Walleye. It was put up while I lived up there at Baudette, I believe. I guess they were building an arena or something. This is on the southwest area of Baudette, if I remember right. I think it was along the road going out to the air base, possibly. I'm doing this narrating and doing this video, playing this video for the first time in 2024. And a lot of this is being done in about 1964. She didn't ordinarily smoke, but she thought she'd try it, and it didn't work out too well. A wife of that airman there, trying to think of his name. Esther was in the hospital, ready to have Ron. And that was our first glimpse of Ron. Ronald Fivig. Ronald Adry Fivig. My dad's name was Adry. This was at the hospital in Baudette, Minnesota. Art Sorensen and Martha visiting us at the trailer at Baudette. That's Martha doing dishes. And that's Ronald Adry Fivig there. That was Becky and Michelle Weiss. And I think Mickey and Denny came over to visit us one day. That's Ethel holding Ron. This would have been back in 1964, and we moved to Wadena in 1965. I'm not sure where we're at here now. Seems to me we were down in the Minneapolis area, possibly. I don't know. Roger Sorensen. And there's Jeffrey. I believe, yes. Now back at Baudette again with the airmen out at the lake, or the Rainy River is really what it is. We took a trip up to Nestor Falls, I believe it is. I think that would have been up in Canada. Oh no, now we're back at the trailer again. As I've kind of mentioned before, this is just some short video clips with 8mm camera, and nothing in a real order either. And that is Ron. I was studying a map here because I was working on my private pilot's license. I had soloed by now. And I went over to International Falls to the Einerson brothers to get my private. I was studying a map here because I was working on my private pilot's license. I had Ron taking a bath. And Ron is trying to stand, I believe, at this point in time. And here Ron is feeding himself. I don't believe that is myself, but I used to fly that airplane. It was a PA-18. And back then, they could hunt fox or wolves or whatever it was from the air. And that might have been a couple of hunters going out. I'm not sure of that, but I remember they used to do that. And here we are. I guess Esther and I are up flying over the city of Baudette. And those are the bridges going over to Rainy River, the town across the way from Baudette in Canada. And that's the Baudette Airport. And I'm sure I know we're on skis here, so I don't know if I'm landing or what. I think I was landing here possibly. Yeah, I was. And then I'm up in the air again with something else now. Oh, this is at Wadena now. It's no longer Baudette in the wintertime, but this is the Civil Air Patrol plane that I used to fly at Wadena, and that was me up. I think I was flying the back seat there, possibly. No, front seat. This is at Duluth. this is that, what do they call it, a drawbridge? Or it's a bridge that raises up when a large ship passes underneath and down a canal, I guess it would be. Duluth, Minnesota. I see there's a lighthouse right there to guide them in. Now the bridge is being raised for that ship to go underneath. I believe we are still at Duluth. There's that bridge I was talking about before that they could draw up when a bridge went underneath it. I understand there was somebody that hung onto that bridge as it was going up one time, and he got tired, fell, and was killed on the sidewalk below. That's a story that I had heard. Helicopters that can land on water. They've got pontoons under them, I noticed. Now back at our trailer at Baudette again. Ron had learned to stand at least. Here's Jeffrey Puhala. And this is over at Art Sorensen's place. Here's Don and Eldora up visiting us at Baudette. And Don is, I don't know what he's imitating. I'm not sure exactly where we're at. This might be Nestor Falls here where we're at. I know we made a trip up there. It's so long ago I can't remember. This is 2024 when I'm narrating this. And this was back in about 1964, 65. Oh, Yellowstone Park. We made a trip out there. I believe that was 1967. I worked at the Old Faithful cafeteria right across the street from the Old Faithful. And this was one time when it was going off. And you see the tourists around there. I worked about 3.5 months out there as a dishwasher back in 1955. A bear looking for food out at Yellowstone. From Yellowstone, we headed over to Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. We haven't gotten there yet, but on our way. This was still around Yellowstone, I believe. Yes. I believe this is located up in the northeast part of Yellowstone Park. And I believe that might be the Teton Mountains in the background there. I know we went past them on the way to Mount Rushmore, of course. There's a lot of horses, wild horses. And here are some oil wells along the way. And it looks like they're pumping oil. I can't remember what kind of an airplane that is. Convair or something? I don't remember. There's Mount Rushmore. They were giving helicopter rides for tourists to view the heads, I suppose, a bit better, maybe. Oh, those are people from Yulin, uh, Conbierke, and uh, Anderson, the banker at Yulin. We happened to run across them out there. And back to my folks' place, I believe, Jeffrey and Ron. Ron is walking quite well. And my dad is looking for four-leaf clovers. He did a lot of that, and he was pretty lucky in finding them. Adrifivig. And now we're back at Mount Rushmore again. As I mentioned, nothing is in order here. Giving tourists rides around Mount Rushmore. He wants to take a little run at it. I don't know, maybe you gain altitude faster by having some forward motion. I have never been in a helicopter. Now we're back at Baudette again. This is where I took my first flight training. First on skis, then on floats, and finally on wheels. I believe that's a Luscombe. Now we're parakiting. I believe somebody's taking me up for a parakite ride. Most likely it was Ron Thompson that was driving. It was he and I that were giving other people rides, and that was one of the rides that he gave me now. These are some of the people that came out when we do our parakiting, out in an alfalfa field quite often, and also along the road. And on Sundays, we'd have quite a lineup of cars that would come out, and a lot of them would like to have a ride, so we'd do it. And then the word got around, and there'd be another batch on another Sunday, I believe. And now here's a lady that's coming down, and they were just helping her so she wouldn't be dragged. It was a little bit of wind, I noticed. That's one of the airmen out there. And they're getting her out of the harness or putting her in the harness. I'm not sure. I don't even know who it would have been, but I think they were handling that part, and then I'd pull her up. This is my sister Shirley, I believe. And this would have been out at the farm. And I was pulling her with the 1959 Ford. I don't think we've got a 400-foot rope on there, and I don't believe I got her up too high there. It wasn't that long a field, and so that's my mother and dad. driving the car back or something like that. And this maybe was Shirley. I'm not sure. Not very steady with the camera here. Not much more than about 30 feet off the ground there. And this is back at Baudette again. She would also go up in the parakeet, but then she had a trained or a tame deer. And of course, during hunting season, they would put the deer away so it wouldn't be out in the open. Here I'm getting into a launch that the airmen used. I believe it was that way. I think it was the airmen that used that launch. And one time I was pulled up in the parakeet behind maybe that very launch. And I don't know how long a distance, maybe for a mile or two, from an island just north of Wheeler's Point. A couple of guys on skis behind a boat. They were airmen. I can't tell who they were. I'm not sure if this might have been the time when... Nah, I was thinking it was the time when I went up in the parachute behind the boat. Now we're back out in the alfalfa field or that area, southeast of Baudette, where we did all our most of our parakiting anyway. That Ford, I could pull the parakeet up in second gear, but I could never get over 20 miles per hour. It was quite a pull. A lot of drag there with that parachute. There are slits in that parachute to give it more lift. Air would flow through, and by having those slits, it gave more lift. Here I am parakiting, and I've got the video camera with me here, shooting down towards the car. And this is on the 400-foot rope, I'm sure, and they're driving along the highway in order to do this. And it would have been Ron Thompson that would have been driving the car while I was in the chute. But it was getting a little dark. It's not as dark as it appears here, but it was getting evening and not very good lighting. This might have been another time when I was up and I had the camera with me and my shadow. We flew beyond those trees before he let me down. At that time, I believe I maybe weighed around 165 pounds. so it wasn't too bad. I had somebody up that was a couple 100 pounds, and you took a bit of power to have him up there. Well, this is along Rainy River again. I believe, yeah, I believe that's Rainy River. Or was I up at Oak Island here? I flew up to Oak Island one time to get my log signed because I needed a cross-country flight. Yeah, this is possibly when I was up at Oak Island and back from Baudette. I flew up there alone, of course. Here is a Civil Air Patrol plane that I used to fly, and this would be at Wadena. That was a fun airplane to fly. It had not a very good tail wheel, so I had to go down to the hardware store downtown to pick up something to at least have a wheel back there. And this is over the Baudette Air Force Base, I believe. I'm recording. Yeah, this is the trailer park at Wadena. And this is the Hentelas. Anna and Jenny Hentela lived here. And we used to land out there with the Civil Air Patrol plane on Sunday afternoons. And there's Rosie on a horse, I believe. Yep, yeah, it's Rose, I believe. Ano and the little children. Don Dresser running. And me taking off in the alfalfa field, I believe. Yeah. He had a nice alfalfa field there that had been cut, and I'd land on it every once in a while, or usually always when we went out to the farm on Sunday afternoons. Here is Ron. I suppose I was going to take him up for a ride too this day. And here I'm taking off on the Wadena Airport. That was just east of the town. There's a brand new airport west of Wadena now, and it was tar runway and everything. This was grass. I believe I will quit this video here shortly. And I'll continue on another later. I was coming in for a landing. I see myself so barely up there now, and possibly cut it off here after I've landed. And that's good enough. Goodbye.